Okay, hello everyone, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. My name is Jessica and I am in charge of our detour program at the Memorial Art Gallery. Essentially, a detour is a quirky themed tour where we pair works of art with things that aren't always directly related to works of art. So in the past, we've done like Harry Potter in art, yoga in art, music in art, and tonight I'm joined by two lovely friends. One is Lauren Tagliaferro, from MAG's curatorial team, and the other is Victoria Cherry, mystic Terratesterians. Lauren, would you like to say something about yourself, and then we'll pop on over to Victoria?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Lauren Taliaferro. I am the curatorial assistant at the Memorial Art Gallery. I am a Cancer sun, I'm a Pisces moon, and I'm an Aquarius rising. So take with that what you will. I am new to the astrology thing. I can barely pronounce it. So I'll be mostly talking about the artwork today. And thanks for coming.
Oh, wait, and you all people might know you though, because they may have seen you on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. In 2019, I won $50,000. And I got to hug Chris Harrison. Wonderful.
Thanks for being here, Lauren, and thanks for telling us all of your signs. Bringing it over to a sign that we didn't hear from, Aries. Victoria, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, the class you're taking, how you got into the wonderful world of astrology?
Okay, well, when I was a teenager, like a lot of other people, someone gave me a copy of the book Linda Goodman's Love Signs, and I was just absolutely intrigued, kind of learning about behavioral archetypes and how they did in love with each other, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And then during COVID, after I had mastered baking bread and perfected my brownie recipe, I thought, oh, and then watched a lot of French television. I thought, oh, I want to learn something new. What would be fun to learn? What might also kind of explain a little bit of what seemed to be going on with everybody's emotions and gyrating things that were happening all over the world. So like a good millennial, which I'm not, I decided that I would take a class from someone I discovered on Instagram, this woman named Deborah Silverman, who's a therapist and an astrologist and has really kind of broken down astrology into like simple digestible bites. I think in the email at the end, the follow-up email will include like a link to her site and her Instagram. And so it was a really wonderful way of learning about concepts that really help you to have compassion for yourself and for others and for what other people are going through, and can give you a little insights into why. And one of the things I also thought was very interesting is that Carl Jung, the famous, psychiatrist, psychologist guy, he always had his patients' charts drawn before he started therapy. So I feel like there's a real kind of like bona fide, piece of data there. And then I love the link between sort of this wisdom that is very similarly shared across all different sorts of cultures. And that really mirrors the 5,000 years worth of culture and art that we have at the Memorial Art Gallery. And I love the way you can connect through space and time to the vibrations of the artists in our collection, and learn about astrology. You feel connected to all the planets in the galaxy that we know from like Star Wars and Star Trek. So that's. And I'm an Aries sun, a Pisces moon, so I'm very sensitive. So if this stinks, don't anyone tell me, and a Scorpio rising.
Wow, thank you. That's a beautiful, beautiful introduction. A couple of housekeeping items. This will be recorded, so if you're uncomfortable with that, just hit the stop video button at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions anytime during the conversation, just ask them in the chat. I'll make sure to ask them to Lauren and Victoria, and we'll get those questions answered for you. Oh, and then we're gonna do 2 super quick icebreakers in the chat. just say your star sign and where you are calling in from. Maybe not like your exact home address, but just like Rochester, New York, or wherever. And I can start that. I'm a Libra and I'm in Webster, New York. Oh, Canandaigua, T, Aquarius. I feel like that suits you.
Oh, did you see Albuquerque?
Albuquerque.
A Pittsburgh Leo, a Cancer in Palmyra, which is well, I mean, a Libra in New York City. Wisconsin.
Wow, very exciting. And also it's so nice to see so many different signs. Although I do see a lot of Libras, which is interesting. But
Well,
maybe
Libras really love beauty and art.
That makes sense. Okay, we are going to get started. I'm going to share my screen here. Wait, can everyone see this? Okay.
We've got a Libra in London. Hi,
Oh,
Philip.
wow. Oh my gosh. Bedtime.
Victoria. Amazing.
Thanks so much, everyone, for being here, literally from around the world. Very exciting. Okay, so wait, am I still sharing my screen? No, I am.
Oh, and I forgot to say, I felt like this was something where you can really feel these connections during what feels like a very disconnected time. So I hope everybody on the call will feel that too. Will feel connected with us here, and when one day come and go see the things we're going to show you in person.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. So it's known as Rochester's Hidden Secret, this beautiful Zodiac fresco that we have, which is actually outside the museum. So a couple weeks ago, I posted a picture of a close-up of it on Instagram, and so many people didn't know where this work of art was, what it was, where it came from. So we are going to start off talking about that today. So the best way to get to the Zodiac fresco is really just on, the front steps of MAG's lawn, and you can see it. Wait, can you see my mouse hovering over it? It's right there. Anyway, it's there. So the history of the Memorial Art Gallery, just really quickly, just so you have just a little bit of background knowledge. So in 1913, Emily Sibley Watson founded the Memorial Art Gallery in memorial to her son, James Averill, who passed away. So, it was really emotional. It was really difficult. So she wanted an architect to design the building that she knew would kind of understand what she was going through, what she was looking to do, what she wanted. So she hired this architect, J.A. Gade, who happened to be her nephew. Emily Sibley Watson had a lot of really wonderful connections. So Gade wanted the museum to feel like a mausoleum because essentially it kind of, it's in memorial to her son, but he also wanted to design something kind of special to give it just like a little bit of a boost, so it wouldn't feel so emotionally heavy when you look at it or when you go inside. So he contacted this man named Frode Rambusch, who at the time he had his hand in designing the Empire State Building, the Waldorf Astoria, Radio City Music Hall. And he was really the only man in America that knew how to make frescoes. Frescoes are really like a European thing. I'm not sure why they're not super popular in America. Lauren, not to put you on the spot, but maybe you know a little bit about that history.
I don't, but I would imagine, especially in the Northeast, it has something to do with the weather.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, so they worked together. Rambusch was the only man for the job. He got the materials in Europe, the paint in Germany, and then he created this really beautiful zodiac design. And you can see the dome in the center shows the sun in the center surrounded by the Milky Way, and gold leaf was applied, which Lauren, again, not to put you on the spot, do you want to talk a little bit about what gold leaf is and why it's so fancy?
Gold leaf is actually thin sheets of gold that is usually applied to a surface with an adhesive. There are a lot of artists that use gold leaf. It comes in sheets, and yeah, you can buy it at your local craft store, usually.
Can you really?
Yeah, you can.
If you melt it down, sorry to get off topic. This is like really important. If you melt down the gold leaf, can you make jewelry?
It's a very, 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 very thin. I mean, it's
Okay.
so thin to the point of like when you apply it, you have to actually brush it off in order to get it off of because you can't even lift it. It's so thin.
Oh, wow.
You need a lot of sheets of gold leaf in order to make jewelry. So I wouldn't advise it, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's that. And when we were looking at this closer, Victoria, aka Aries Cherry, you noticed that the entrance is a scorpion.
Yeah, that you walk, so that when you walk into the museum, the first sign that you walk under is the sign of Scorpio, which is often associated with like death and rebirth, that people, you could kill your ego to allow your soul to ascend. So I think that is really, really interesting that's sort of James Averill died, but because his soul was so in tune with art and architecture, this beautiful treasure was created and gifted to the people of the city of Rochester, and held in trust by the University of Rochester, learning of the highest order.
Nice, very nice.
and what I love too is like people tend to know we all kind of grow up like knowing our sign, but what we really just know is our sun sign. And while there are 12 zodiac signs, there are like 8 planets other than Earth, plus the sun and the moon. And when you get your zodiac chart done, each of those planets aligns with a zodiac sign. And that's something that until I took this class, I didn't know. I knew you had a sun sign and this thing called a rising sign, which I didn't really know what it was. But I didn't know I had a moon sign and a Saturn sign and a Jupiter sign. So interpreting how the planets are placed in the signs and in relation to each other at your time of birth, and then looking at what's happening with the planets at any given moment, that's what an astrologer interprets to sort of give you insights into yourself and maybe why you're behaving the way you're behaving, or, stuff like that.
Wow. So speaking of, so speaking of planets, as I attempt my first transition, oops, there it is again. We have this lovely work of art inside the museum. The original entrance, once you're inside the museum, you can see this lovely piece. Lauren, would you like to tell us a little bit about Galaxy?
Absolutely. This is Fritz Troutman's Galaxy. It was painted in 1942. And Fritz Troutman was a local artist. He taught in MAG's creative workshop for 33 years. And his passion for painting really inspired his students. Over his lifetime, he developed this approach to color that was both scientific and mystical. And in fact, he painted Galaxy to teach his theories, his science and mystical theories of color to students. So the MAG purchased the painting from him in 1956, and it has been like a visitor favorite ever since. People love it. I mean, it's not hard to see why. It's incredibly beautiful. It's very cool. It looks very, very contemporary, considering that it's, mid-century. And despite appearances, not a single drop of black paint was used, because Fritz believed that it dampened the natural vibrations of the color. So he focused on what he considered to be the 4 primary colors rather than the traditional 3. And he wrote once, Galaxy symbolizes the great truth that every phenomenon in life involves all of life. Each globe of Galaxy is composed of exactly the same elements. The entire spectrum wraps itself around each globe with unvarying uniformity. So you get these kind of like warm reds and bright yellow and this cool blue, and then this beautiful deep violet. So it's a very colorful and beautiful piece. And it's just a very cool interpretation of color theory by an artist.
And Lauren, do you know anything about his personal life, or do you want to tell that after do you, because
do I know anything about his personal life? It sounds like you know plenty about Victoria.
Well,
I think you can spill that tea.
oh, well, if anyone is watching this with a child, please send your child off to get a snack or to go do an errand. We're recording this so you can decide later if it's appropriate for your child to see or not. But now all children leave the room. Okay, so Fritz. Well, Jessica, do you want to talk about Fritz?
Sure, absolutely. So while we were doing research for this, and even a little bit beforehand, we have a lovely librarian, Ebony Pearl Jones. She takes care of the archives and goes through notes. And one day she was organizing things and she found this diary, but it wasn't just any diary. It was Fritz Troutman's diary from, the good old days of his youth, which was not misspent.
Yeah, he was born in 1884.
Which is important to note because he was kind of a wild man. He had I don't know how to say this delicately. Orgies.
Wild
He had like
parties.
drunken orgy parties all the time. And in this diary, he would like write some pretty saucy details about what he and his friends got up to. So that was a really interesting discovery. Not something that happens every day in, the cardiganed art world. But actually the art world is pretty wild. So when I found that out, I immediately asked Victoria if Fritz was a Scorpio, because from what I know about Scorpios, that seems, no offense to anyone who's a Scorpio, but that seems like it would be right up their alley. And oops, sorry, wait, really quick. This is a work of art that one of Fritz's students did, Carol Friedlander, who actually, so she was able to learn under Fritz as a student, and now she is a member of our board. And she's a really lovely lady, and this is a beautiful work of art she did with his color study. But wait, sorry, going back to Fritz's star sign. Right, I thought he was a Scorpio, but Victoria, yeah, he's not.
Well, you were close. I mean, you were kind of close. I mean, he is a Pisces sun and he is a Scorpio rising. And Scorpios do have, like, their tagline is I desire. And the part of the body that Scorpio is associated with are I believe they're scientifically called the gonads, or the sex organs. But I would like to say that I do have a friend who's in her 90s who took art classes with him as a child, and she was completely unaware of anything having to do with wild sex parties. So that gave me some comfort. And then also, when I look at his chart, one of the things that I think is so interesting is that he has Uranus, the planet of kind of eccentricity and future thinking, in the sign of Virgo, which is all about systems and order. And he was really into systems and order, but also in a new and different and kind of funky way. And in the library, there's like 16 volumes of his writings and his notes. I took a brief look at it and it was a little overwhelming. We also, if anybody wants it, he was a member of this thing called the I can't pronounce it, society, and it was in California, and it was a religious Christian group, but that also believed that utilizing kind of information from that blueprint that happens in the sky when you're born can be really helpful in life. And I did a little research, and there was a chapter in Buffalo, and then there was a chapter in Rochester. And this chart was done in 1920, but then he got together with the society locally, and in 1929, they did up a whole report, and it's 34 pages long. it's complicated. But if anybody wanted to read what an old-timey astrological report read like, we can send you the PDFs. And one of the other things that's pretty interesting is the report was written, I think I said in 1929. There's a planet. Does anyone know? You could put in the chat what planet was discovered in 1930. Okay, I'll tell you. It was Pluto. And Jessica, would this be a good time for me to tell people about the planets?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if people can see that, but in order to help you remember the order of the planets, I will share with you what my 4th grade teacher told me, which is, my very elegant mother just sat upon 9 porcupines. If you can remember that, and that's a little visual to help you, you can remember the name of the order of the planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, which is our planet, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And each of these different planets is sort of associated with like a different kind of energy. Like your sun is your kind of personality and the way you present yourself to the world. The moon, which isn't a planet, but it's a moon, but we kind of call it a planet in astrology, kind of governs emotions. Mercury is the planet associated with your mind. And for anybody who's a female who's ever experienced PMS and how that can link up with the moon, and for any male who's ever been around a female who probably also has recognized this, that just kind of gives you that feel, that gives you a sort of intrinsic understanding of how we can experience these energies from kind of outer space. So in my mind, there's something, and I call it PMS, the planetary messaging system. And you can have a copy of this, and then you can kind of learn a little bit about each planet and how it affects you. And then it lists each of the different zodiac signs are governed kind of by one of the planets. Like Mercury governs Gemini and Virgo. Now we'll go back to Scorpio. Before 1930, Scorpio was considered to be ruled by Mars. So things change. And then Pluto, the planet, you know, some people have now said it's not really a planet, but in astrology, it's still considered a planet. And it's a really powerful planet called a dwarf planet. And I would not mess with it by telling it it doesn't count. So anyway, so I hope that's a little helpful on understanding the planets.
Yes, this is a very wonderful drawing. Very informative. So wait, so according to science, Pluto is a dwarf planet. So it's still technically are they still teaching it like it's a planet in school?
In astrology.
Okay, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I don't know about like in astronomy. And then also one of the things.
It's been downgraded to a dwarf planet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not any better than Ceres at this point. Sorry.
But I also think one of the things that's good, and it's not written on this chart, but it can also I should have practiced this again, is that, you know, it takes the Earth 365 days to make its rotation around the sun. And when you divide 365 by 12, you get approximately 30 days, which is how long we're all familiar with, you know, sort of our sun signs as being 30 days. But different planets take different amounts of time to get around the sun. And so those planets can either hang around a shorter period of time or a longer period of time in each of the signs. Like, for example, you know, it takes Pluto 249 years to make its full orbit. So it basically spends 20 years in each sign. And that can sort of, oh shoot, I'm getting a scam likely. Okay, call. So that can sort of, and that sort of speaks to generations, why certain generations have certain kind of overhangs, because let's say their Pluto for the period of 20 years, everybody's Pluto will have been in Cancer. So there's those kind of flavors that happen generationally. Those are the outer planets, and then the inner planets are personal. So that's all I'm going to say now about planets.
Yeah, thank you so much. So our next work of art is this piece. Lauren, why don't you tell us about the Bay?
Sure. So this is the Bay of a Stock seen from the east by Paul Cezanne. He probably painted this between 1878 and 1882. And Paul Cezanne exhibited in the Impressionist exhibition of 1874, and he was encouraged by Camille Pissarro to begin painting outside in the en plein air. So he then kind of started moving beyond the style of Impressionism and began building form with color that was more analytical than sensory. So he wasn't really painting like what he felt was the scene. He was kind of building shapes in a new way with color. And so this, he frequently painted scenes of the small town of L'Estaque in southern France, which is where he lived and worked periodically from 1870 to about 1885. So this is something that he wasn't really interested in rendering particular like momentary impressions. He wanted to record his sensations of nature. And so this kind of painting typifies this technique. So he suggests form and volume through these interlocking shapes, and these are rendered with bold diagonal brushstrokes. And this bright color and these kind of like geometric shapes were the beginnings of modern art and Cubism. So Paul Cezanne is often and frequently referred to as the father of modern art. And as you can see here, there is a lot of kind of modern art kind of elements to it, especially with regards to rendering kind of this landscape and the buildings as well.
And that is so cool because his Jupiter, which is the planet of like expansion and joy, is located in the sign of Libra, which is the sign of like art and beauty. So I love that he has expanded people, like he expanded the notion of how to portray like beauty and landscapes. And he also has his Jupiter is in an aspect with Neptune, the planet which is like a very artistic and dreamy planet, which is located in the sign of Aquarius, which is very futuristic and, you know, about making new orders and new ways of looking at things. So that's kind of an amazing synergy between his zodiac chart and what Lauren just said. Oh, and then because there are houses in this picture, would this be a good time to just briefly explain a little bit about houses?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So when you get a zodiac chart, yeah, it's divided kind of like 12 slices of pizza. For anyone who's local, if you haven't gone to Pizza Stop in Pittsburgh Plaza, I totally encourage you to, because that pizza tastes like New York City pizza. It's really, really good. Okay, so each of these different slices of the pie are ruled by are associated with one of the zodiac signs. And where a planet, like when you're trying to figure stuff out, you sort of look at the planet, which is like one of your, those the different personalities of each of those planets are kind of like your board of directors all together, and you're like the conductor of either like the symphony or of this kind of like little corporation. And when the planets show up in your chart, they'll show up in a space. And that's sort of the space where you're going to most feel like the energy of that planet and the flavor of the sign that's impacting that planet. So like, for example, like where your sun, the house that your sun shows up in is the house that's sort of like most important in your chart. Or if you have a house and lots of planets appear there, that's also very important. And so like the first house is your physical appearance, your ego, how you initiate things. For example, the seventh house, which I am seeing a lot of in some of these artist things, has to do with kind of cooperation, balance, beauty. The fifth house had to do with entertainment, children, joyfulness. The 12th house has to do with magic and past lives and secrets. So that just gives you a little flavor of the houses, I hope.
Victoria, can you tell us a little bit about the elements that are associated with the different houses?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Okay, so the elements, that is such a key thing. And maybe people could put in the chat again if they know what element their sign falls in. So the elements are water, air, fire, and earth. And knowing about your elements are really going to are going to come into play too when we talk about an artist who's coming up, Kusana. So the water element if you have a lot of planets in water, it sort of describes like your emotions, and you like to retreat. Earth signs, it's sort of about being practical, taking care of things, really like liking nature. Your fire signs are sort of like your initiators, and your air are your talkers, like talkers, thinkers. So each of those elements has there are three different signs in there. There's a fire, so like, let's say fire, you've got Aries, you've got Leo, you've got Sagittarius. And in each of those elements, one of the signs is going to be something known as a cardinal sign. They're your kind of like they like to be the boss. But they each like to be the boss in a slightly different way. So sometimes they butt heads. And then there's your fixed sign. And those are your Aquarius, your Leo, and your Scorpio. A little more stubborn. And then there's the mutable signs, the Sagittarius, the Gemini, the Virgo. And they're more like agreeable, changeable. And so a lot of times, if you don't do anything else, like in the follow-up email, we're going to tell you how you can look up your own chart. Sometimes just the simple thing of understanding your elements, the four elements. Are they in balance? Are they out of balance? Like I think the next artist we're going to do is Jacob Lawrence. And, he has this, he has a beautifully balanced chart.
Perfect transition. So this piece is called Summer Street Scene in Harlem. It's from 1948. And this is by the artist Jacob Lawrence. And he is best known for chronicling the migration of African Americans from the South to the North in the first half of the 20th century. And this was a personal subject for him because his parents actually did that. They migrated to New Jersey from the rural South before he was born. And he's also known for his portrayals of Black historical subjects as well as contemporary life. We have a portfolio in the collection of his depiction of John Brown in his life. He actually referred to his style as dynamic Cubism, although he has said that it was not so much influenced by French art as it was the shapes and colors of Harlem as seen here. So Actually, he had a very interesting life. In October of 1943, during the Second World War, he was drafted into the United States Coast Guard and served as a public affairs specialist with the first racially integrated crew on the USCGC Sea Cloud under Carlton Skinner. And he continued to paint and sketch while he was in the Coast Guard, and he documented the experience of war around the world. And he actually produced about 48 paintings during this time, but all of those were lost, which is very wild. He continued to paint for his entire life, actually up until a few weeks before his death from lung cancer in 2000, and he died at 82. And the New York Times at the time described him as, quote, one of America's leading modern figurative painters and among the most impassioned visual chroniclers of the African-American experience. So,
right. And yes, all right, great.
And he came to MAG.
yep.
Twice. He came twice. There you can see him with Grant Holcomb, our director emeritus of the museum, and then the two little girls who are sitting next to Gwen Lawrence are Grant's daughters, and they just made fast friends. They stayed very, very good friends. Jacob Lawrence came back. He came when there was a big, do you know the exhibition, what it was called, the exhibition, Jess, that he came up for to
I don't, it was
party?
just a couple of years before my time, unfortunately.
I think it was back in the 90s. I'm not sure you were born. And I think it was a show. Lauren, do you know it was with the Studio Museum in Harlem? It was a great show. You can see it. They had amazing turnout. He loved being at the MAG. And then some years later, he was granted an honorary doctorate from the MAG. And he came back to receive that. And then his chart, one of the things I love about his chart is he has 5 planets in air. So 5 planets in the signs of communication. And I think the way he was able to, and also his mind, his Mercury, the planet of his mind, which is in Libra, the planet of the sign of balance, is doing something which is called trining with his moon, the emotions, in Gemini, a sign of communication, conjunct, which means sharing powers with Jupiter, the planet of expansion. And the way he was able to take really difficult subject matter, like the migration series, and figure out how to make it beautiful and holy. If you ever see it, those paintings are there. I think are there 64 of them? Half of them are at the collection in Washington, DC. About once a decade, they're brought together. It is like being inside a cathedral. And I feel like, and I don't know, Lauren, maybe you could speak to this. I feel like the way his artworks almost remind me of stained glass, and the way he told this story was so innovative, and it's so emotionally powerful. And his Uranus, again, that the planet of forward thinking and different thinking, is in Aquarius, the sign that's, sort of like its host. It's the same kind of a thing. I love him. And when I found out that he had been here twice, and that he was amazingly wonderful, and that he became fantastic friends with Grant Holcomb, I don't know, it gave me goosebumps. So I hope you guys are getting some goosebumps too.
Just as an aside, I feel like it's impossible to not want to be fantastic friends with Grant Holcomb. He's he's a great man.
That's true. We all love him. From you could be 5 to 105, and everybody's got a little crush.
He's incredibly charming. I could not escape the charms of Grant Holcomb.
Those blue eyes.
I know.
So before I get fired, our next artist is Kusama.
So this piece is called Statue of Venus Obliterated by Infinity Nets by Yayoi Kusama. It's a fairly recent piece. It's from 1998. And you may know Yayoi Kusama for her infinity nets or her polka dots. That's a big thing that she is really well known for. Her work is very accessible and very beautiful and colorful. And these infinity nets, like you see here, they have been a lifelong obsession for her. She has described these nets, which is like a single arc of paint repeated endlessly. They kind of look like, because they're not uniform polka dots, they kind of look like bird murmurations. You know, when you see like a giant flock of birds like moving through the sky and they kind of cluster in one area and they kind of spread out in another. That's what her infinity nets kind of look like, or like that you threw a net over a three-dimensional object or across a wall. So these nets are kind of a manifestation of her self-obliteration. And these she sees in her hallucinations. She is compelled to recreate them and repeat them on surfaces. And it's a part of her mental illness and a part of her like psychological pain. She had a very, very difficult upbringing. And so it's this wonderful kind of push and pull between the beautifulness and the accessibility of her artwork and how Instagrammable it is, when in fact these polka dots are about her wanting to dissolve into the universe and just become one with the universe and obliterate her mind and her body. So it's such an interesting thing that her artwork comes from a real place of severe pain, and yet it is so beautiful and photographable and, you know, replicable across all sorts of different media. This piece is actually number 5 from a suite of 10, and each were painted with a different pair of colors. We have obviously the hot pink and the green, and, you know, we were at a art fair a couple of years ago and we saw one that was black with hot pink. And I personally think we had the best one, but she actually in the original installation placed 10 of them in a circle facing each other. So this is one of our favorites in the collection for sure.
Lauren, I love how you talk about like the push and pull. Her work is so beautiful, but there is such a dark, sinister edge to it.
Yeah.
And one of her more famous pieces is this chair, which is at the MoMA. And actually, Victoria, I think I was with you the first time I saw this chair in real life, and I didn't know what it was. I wanted to touch it because, you know, I just wanted to know what it felt like.
Yeah. I mean, that's the joy of it. So they are, in fact, what you are thinking. Those are phalluses. They're meant to be soft, padded phalluses. And this was another aspect of her artwork that's very into repetition. She had a period in her artwork, like in her oeuvre, where she was covering everything, you know, floors, chairs, walls, ladders, everything in these weird soft phalluses, because she had both a fear and a fascination with sex. Her father was a philanderer, and her mother would send her, Yayoi, to spy on her father while he was philandering with these women and his mistresses. And so that really impacted her child brain. And so this is the manifestation of that, for better or for worse.
Lauren, we have a question in the chat. Have you touched the piece at MAG with special curatorial gloves? Oh, oops, here's George Clooney, because she likes polka dots. Sorry.
Yeah, Kusama-esque polka dots. The piece at the MAG, have I touched it? Yes. It is what you would imagine. It's just kind of smooth painted material. I would love to touch one of her phallus pieces, but unfortunately we don't have any of that. That's another thing, these infinity rooms, these are very popular. You walk in, very Instagrammable, you know, you want to take a picture of yourself, but this is another aspect and an outcropping of her, again, wanting to be obliterated. So this idea of you walk into this room and the amount of lights and reflective surfaces and all of this stuff is meant to make you feel like you are in the universe and your body is nothing and your mind is nothing, and you are now one with all of these lights and reflections and darkness and all of this stuff. So
Has anyone attending ever been in an infinity room? You can just comment in the chat.
yeah, please, I would love to hear your experience.
Yeah, I went to one in Phoenix.
Mm.
And my experience was not that I was one with the universe. Mine was, oh my gosh, get me out of here. I'm having a panic attack. It's interest, like all of the mirrors, you don't know where you're going. And it's very easy to accidentally touch the art / run into it. Yikes.
Yeah, it is both agoraphobic and claustrophobic at the same time. It feels like too much space and not enough space. And I think that's a very interesting observation of that artwork. Good job, Jess.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah. And I think it kind of blows my mind, the little things I wrote down on her chart and how well this is fitting in with what Lauren just said. Because Kusama has no planets in air in her chart. And the notes I made about, so when an element is missing in a chart, it could either mean you have it nailed. Some people believe you have it nailed in another life and you don't need it. Like you're good, you've got it. But it can also mean that you don't have it mastered and that it's kind of a problem for you and it's missing. And the notes I wrote down were that it can be that you get lost in your mind and that you lose interest in people. And I think that sounded like it kind of aligned really well with what Lauren was talking about. Another really interesting thing about Kusana's chart, at least to me, was the placement of her Mercury. So planets can have certain signs where they are more comfortable, and other signs where it's complicated. Like it doesn't work that well. And her Mercury is placed in Pisces, which is a placement where you have to be really careful because you can get kind of like lost in your dreams and you can get disconnected with reality and you can really want to escape. So
yeah, it's crazy how
all of this. That's wild.
Yeah, how accurate her signs are with who she is as a person.
Yeah.
Next we have Alexander Calder.
Yeah. So this piece is this in our collection?
Yes.
It is in our collection. I have never seen it. I'm relatively new to the mag. I got here about 3 years ago. So, but I can tell you about Alexander Calder. So he was a sculptor born to a family of sculptors who trained as a mechanical engineer. So it's kind of an interesting way he got there, but he is best known for his amorphous sculptural shapes, often hung in mobiles to generate movement in the air. I'm sure we have all seen a Calder. We have a piece in our pavilion called Polychrome Horizontals that was recently installed. And although these sculptures are not representational of really anything, a lot of his themes and his symbols and his shapes are related to the cosmos or suggestive of nature. And even though, again, he's primarily known for his sculpture, he also created paintings and prints, wonderful little miniatures, theater set design, jewelry design, as you can see here, tapestries and rugs, and political posters. And in fact, he even painted an entire jet for Braniff Airlines as a, quote, flying canvas. So he has been very prolific throughout his life.
And I love in his chart, but especially because a Calder exhibition that I saw as a kid is one of the things that most sticks out in my mind as favorite exhibitions ever. And I also love the fact that the mag happens to own his first outdoor commissioned piece. And he's become so famous for his outdoor, his big outdoor pieces. But his chart is so well balanced. His elements are well balanced. His modes, that cardinal, fixed, and mutable, well balanced. The guy is just well balanced. And everything that I've read about him, he was really likable. He was really friendly. He was a lot of fun. And like Jacob Lawrence, he came to Rochester and visited the mag, but he wasn't Calder when, you know, he wasn't yet like super famous Calder, because he came up to visit this woman, Charlotte Whitney Allen, and yes, who our library is named, right? Did she donate the money for our library? It's named for her.
Yes.
Okay. And she was like a ton of fun. Like this one, a ton of fun. She was friends with Fritz. There's little notes like in the library, like correspondence between her and Fritz. So I don't know if she was going to any of Fritz's parties, but I'm gonna guess
Scandal. Those librarians.
I'm gonna guess that Fritz went to her parties, because you know what she used to do every afternoon at 4, even I guess during Prohibition. She had like a party, like at 4 o'clock. She wasn't having ladies over for tea. She was having them over to like spill the tea and drink cocktails. And her chart, can anybody guess like what they're gonna think she is? I mean, like she's hanging out with Fritz. She's like the first person to commission an outdoor Calder. Does anyone have any guesses as to what she might be that they want to put in the chat, what her sun sign might be? No. Do you have a guess, Jess or Lauren?
I feel like pretty self-indulgent saying Libra.
My guess, I mean, from what little I know, I would guess a Leo.
Oh, we have Leo, Sag, Aquarius, Scorpio in the chat.
Who guessed Aquarius?
Oh, T.
All right. She is, I mean, because you know what? She was a humanitarian, and that's also one of the things that's associated with Aquarius. And because she was a huge benefactress. She was also really kind of eccentric. She happened to go for a year to the same secondary school that I went to in New York City. And she wasn't kicked out, but she wasn't invited back. And there you can, there's something about this in the University of Rochester library that I read in the archives, where it talked about, yes, how Miss Spence said that she was too strong-minded and independent. And those are real characteristics of Aquarius. And she also has her Jupiter in Aquarius, which is expansive. So she was even like more like that than I guess your run-of-the-mill Aquarian would be. And one of the cool things is she was also practical, and she has a whole bunch of planets in Earth, which I think really speaks to that foresight to give money for a library, for some of the good works that she gave money to support. And then also Alexander Calder would send jewelry to her, and she would have little jewelry parties and sell jewelry to her friends to help him earn and raise money before he was big and famous. So if anybody who's watching this is in Rochester and has like a grandmother, and if you see, as someone in the chat said, if you see some jewelry that looks like maybe you made it yourself, before you throw it out or give it away to someone, make sure wasn't made by Calder.
Wise words. Oh, oops, I was supposed to show this earlier. I'm so sorry. This is more information about the elements. You can have a quick look, memorize it.
I'm refreshing.
Lauren, I would say you're refreshing, yeah.
Oh, well, thanks. That's kind of you to say.
I don't know how to smoothly transition to our next work of art, but here it is.
Yeah, I can just start talking about it. So this is Jackie. This is, again, obviously part of our collection, but this is by Andy Warhol. This is from 1964. For those of you who hopefully came to see our Warhol exhibition that just recently closed, you would have seen a lot of these kinds of artwork, silk screens. So he would use this kind of unorthodox approach to portraiture, right? So he would borrow from media photographs of celebrities, and then he would use these to kind of construct an individual's public image instead of, like a typical artist using a brush to render an artistic interpretation of a sitter, right? So this work is part of his Jackie series, which he began shortly after the assassination of JFK in 1963. And as the basis for the painting, he first selected 8 photographs from the mass media coverage of the event, and then he cropped the pictures to focus on Jackie only. And he used a commercial silkscreen technique to produce multiple versions of this work. So again, this is a very like Warholian thing where he was using, 15 minutes of fame and celebrities and this kind of like mass produced artwork of his factory that was very big for him at the time.
Okay. And I think one of the things I think is kind of interesting and fun is that Jackie and Andy were both the same sign. They were both Leos. They both had their moons in Aries. Andy also has a ascendant in Leo. I mean, he is a triple fire. He is just triple fire. And he also has something which is interesting. He has his planets clustered in his first and second house. And people who have a lot of things, and he has his sun in his 12th house, which is the house of undoing, a house where people may not seem earthly bound. If your sun is there, you're often creative and very reclusive, which we think of Andy Warhol as being out there at his factory at parties, but he also had this side of him, which also I think Leos do, of being kind of reclusive. But his sun is conjunct his ascendant and is also like kind of teetering back and forth between his first house, which is the house of self and ego and self-reflection. And a lot of times people who have a lot of planets in the first house, they have a lot of chi, and people have trouble keeping up with them. And I think people have trouble keeping up with Andy Warhol. So I think that's pretty interesting. And also, oh yeah, someone shot Andy Warhol. He lived back in like 1968. And there were some people who felt, I don't know, that his being shot was a triggering incident to the Zodiac killer that was like doing their business in the late 60s and early 70s. I can't speak to that, but I thought it went with our theme, so I threw it in there.
Wow. That's wild. It's so crazy. Again, how accurate certain things are. Like, yeah, Andy being all fire. So our last work of art is this ancient thing that Lauren's going to tell you about because I don't know.
I mean, it's not ancient. It's
Sorry, it looks. It's only a couple hundred years old. It looks ancient.
It's old. But this is our Persian astrolabe from around 1697. Astrolabes themselves are actually very ancient. You're not wrong. The Greeks invented the basic astrolabe more than 2,000 years ago, and Muslim scholars had created sophisticated instruments by around 800, the year 800. So they actually introduced the devices to Europe through Islamic Spain in the early 1100s, where they became like this basic component in scientific education. But an astrolabe is a handheld astronomical and astrological instrument used to measure the height of the sun or a star above the horizon. And these measurements are made by manipulating, as you can see here, the series of circular brass plates, and that shows how the skies will appear at a specific place at a given time. So,
and now you can just download an app from the App Store.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Are they still in use today?
I mean, I would imagine they're used as kind of a like a hobby thing, or just like one would a sundial or another. It would be kind of like a hobby thing.
Well, one thing that I think is so cool is you could still use that today, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might, because of the year when it was done, it might not include some of our friendly outer planets, like I don't know, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. I mean, I think it definitely wouldn't have Pluto. I don't know when they found Uranus and Neptune. I'm not quite sure. But around the time that this actual object was made, Jupiter and Saturn were conjunct, meaning they were at the same degree they were at the same degree in the sign of Aquarius. And something is very exciting about that, because that's going to happen again this year on December 21st. And what that should sort of herald is a newfound sense of hope and a strong desire for significant collective change. It's called a great conjunction, and it marks a new era. And it's literally taking place on the, one of the, what are they called? The equinox, the winter.
Yes, the winter, yeah.
The winter equinox. And this is the first time in 200 years that they're meeting in an air sign. So I don't know. So this is sort of like this cosmic event that's inviting us to align with change and transformation. And I just think that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yes, especially after, the past year that everyone has endured. Yeah, that is beautiful. Very timely.
Just as an FYI, my in-house research team just told me that Uranus was discovered in 1781 and Neptune in 1846. And Neptune was discovered purely by math.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. It's great to have a scientist in the family.
He says you're welcome. He says you're welcome.
So that concludes. Does anyone have any last minute quick questions for Aries Cherry or Lauren Taliaferro before we end? Victoria, thank you all so much. Thank you for sharing so many fun facts. You hear about astrology and so many people are so quick to like shoo it away, but I mean, so many of the things align so perfectly. And I love how you talked about Carl Jung and how, his Myers-Briggs personality test, which I live by. I actually sent it to you, Victoria. I don't know if you remember. You never did the test. But it's just nice that he believed in it too.
Right?
Oh, also, yes, we will send info about the astrology class.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you know what, if people want to unmute themselves, is that okay? Because there's a couple of people who were in my class. I don't know if they're still on the call, and they could probably also speak to how much fun it was. And right now there's a free Meet the Planets thing that you can sign up for.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Very nice. So it looks like we don't have a whole lot of questions, but this was recorded. We will be getting it up on our website, and we will email you all the link. And if you think of any questions that you have for Victoria or for Lauren, you can always just email them to me. I emailed you all this morning, so you have my email address, and I'll pass those on and get back to you. And again, thank you all so much for joining. Victoria and Lauren, thank you for sharing so many lovely, fun facts. I will never look at Galaxy again the same way.
I was going to say again, ever.
Sorry, I know. I was so overwhelmed with what I learned about Fritz Troutman that I couldn't think straight.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.